Did you know that Battletoads was a hard game? Of course you did. A discussion of difficult NES games always breathes the same names: Battletoads, Ninja Gaiden, Ghosts and Goblins, and a few others. But the term NES hard is about more than just those popular games. Today, I want to take a look at some really difficult NES games that don't get enough attention but are extremely tough. Often just as hard, if not harder, as some of those games we hear about all the time. So let me know what games I missed, maybe some that deserve more attention for being hard, and leave a like and hit that subscribe button. Let's get into it. Let's start with Battletoads and Double Dragon. This game is effectively Battletoads 2, although the Lee brothers are here. This game has much more in common with Battletoads and Double Dragon, and you can see it the second you turn the game on. Graphically, it all looks like Battletoads and has between level cutscenes, just like that game. The combat feels the same, and there is a wide variety of different playstyles and gimmicks, including some classic nods to Battletoads, such as a speeder bike and descending using a rope. The soundtrack is great as well. I still prefer the soundtrack from the first game, but the tunes here are great and definitely top tier NES stuff. I really like they did with these new gimmicks. The speeder bike level is much easier, but includes combat where you can kick enemies off their bikes. And the rope sections are more interesting, as they include swinging over pits, avoiding spikes, and even a horizontal section, making these classic gimmicks feel fresh. They also introduced some brand new things like the spaceship shooter, which is a complete nightmare. Thank goodness we have auto fire, or I probably would have never beaten this part. In a nod to Double Dragon, the emphasis here is more on combat than the original Battletoads, and you have a ton of satisfying ways to beat up enemies, like pounding them through the floor. Every level has a boss. Some of these are super tough. The final fight with the Dark Queen is harder than any fight in either series. It starts off real easy, but the more you beat her up, the faster she goes, and it is really difficult. It's not as difficult as Battletoads overall, very few games are, but it's still on the harder end of NES games, and I feel like it gets overshadowed in the conversation about difficult games, probably because it's not Battletoads, but it is a completely awesome game and among the top tier of difficult NES games. Now, I just said that very few games are as hard as Battletoads, and even fewer are harder, but the next game makes Battletoads feel like a Sesame Street game. Holy Diver is, in my view, the hardest game on the NES. It is so obscenely difficult, but rarely gets talked about. I get it, Holy Diver did not get a US release during the NES's lifespan. It did get a physical release by Retrobit in 2018, but that's pretty niche, and not something the average gamer would know about. You play as a little wizard dude who kind of looks and walks a bit like Simon Belmont. In fact, the whole game has a very similar graphical aesthetic to Castlevania. You start in a creepy castle, and there's a dark gothic vibe that permeates every locale. Your character shoots a little fireball that only goes a short distance before disappearing, not too dissimilar from the range of Simon Belmont's whip. You also get a variety of spells that are powered by your limited mana pool. There are a lot of cool concepts here, but it is just so hard. Enemies attack relentlessly, they are fast with difficult to hit patterns, and they just keep coming. Your life bar is not that long and it disappears quickly. There are permanent upgrades you can find, but if you miss one, you better kill yourself so you can restart the stage and pick it up, or you'll be impossibly underpowered for the rest of the game. The good news is, you do get unlimited continues and a checkpoint each time you enter a new screen, so you can keep on trying, and you are going to need to. Just about every screen in this game is difficult, and every level ends in a boss, which are just about as difficult as everything else in this godforsaken game. If you want a challenge, definitely check it out. I have beaten Battletoads on original hardware, but the only way I was able to finish this game was with massive save state abuse. Our next game is Amagon. This is one of my favorite obscure NES games. Some people hate on it, but to me it is just amazing. You play as a little dude named Amagon who crash lands on an island and has to fight everything. Birds, insects, mushrooms, literally everything here is trying to kill you, and you die in one hit. You have a gun, but it has limited ammo. It's not scarce, so if you play smart, you should not really be too worried about it, but you could definitely run out by just mashing the button, so you gotta be careful of when you pick your shots. Killing enemies drops ammo and points. Oh wow, you're thinking, points? How terribly useless and unexciting. Normally I would agree, but in this game your score matters. As you progress through the level, enemies will eventually drop this little icon, allowing you to turn into Amagon, a giant buff dude who kills everything with one massive uppercut and has a life bar. The length of the life bar is determined by how many points you have, so the more score you rack up before transforming, the longer your life bar will be. You also don't accumulate points when playing as Amagon, so play becomes a balancing act of knowing when to accumulate points as Amagon and when to turn into Amagon to get through tough parts and defeat bosses. If you complete a level as Amagon, you revert back to Amagon and gain points back proportionate to how much life you have. Personally, I found the best strategy is to get really good at the first two stages, rack up a high score, then trigger Amagon ASAP on the later levels to just wreck everything. Amagon is a fantastic hidden gem. It's difficult, but also very unique, and the juxtaposition between the wimpy Amagon, who dies from a tiny insect bite, to the mighty Amagon, who crushes everything in his path, complete with his own theme music, is really fun. And speaking of Ninja Gaiden, can we take a minute to talk about Part 3? I know that we constantly talk about how difficult the first game is, and it's tough, but let's be honest, most of the difficulty just comes from the last world and the ridiculous setback from losing to the final boss. The third entry is just ludicrous. This is one of those games that was made much more difficult for the American market, so if you play the Japanese version, it's pretty fair. Heck, they even give you passwords, which is a first for the series. But not in the American version. Here you get limited continues, which is also a first for the series in the worst possible way. They removed the password feature entirely, and they cranked up the damage ratios to make the whole thing much more difficult than it needed to be. I enjoy this game, but the US version strayed from its original vision. Even though an actual cartridge of this game, I never play it. Whenever I do play this game, it's the Japanese ROM with the English translation, because it's just a much better experience. As it stands, I think the US version of the game is harder than the original and never gets talked about. It's still a great time. It has some cool new elements like the ceiling hang to the tried and true formula, but fans of the series are probably better off hunting down the Japanese version than dealing with the extra layer of difficulty that should have never been there in the first place. Adventure Island is such a weird series. It started off as just Wonder Boy, but for some reason, the Wonder Boy series went in a totally different direction and turned into one of the best retro adventure Metroidvanias out there. Meanwhile, sequels to this game kept the Adventure Island moniker and played as a linear action platformers, at least the first three on the NES did. It's a great series, and later entries would introduce dinosaur companions and some other fun things, but in terms of just raw difficulty, the original Adventure Island is one of the hardest games on the system, and rarely gets mentioned in the same breath as stuff like Battletoads, but it should. You play as a little dude named Master Higgins on a quest to rescue Tina and a bunch of other girls on the way. This dude is hungry. I mean really, he has a life bar, but it's more of a hunger meter and acts as the game's timer. It's constantly counting down and runs out, you just die. I get it, I'm a hungry boy too, but I can go 5 minutes without eating, so the hunger meter is a bit much, and everything here is trying to kill you. The enemies kill you in one hit for the most part, the time meter counts down quick, so you gotta constantly collect fruit and other food to stay alive, and tripping over a rock drains a weird amount of hunger meter. I trip all the time, it doesn't make me hungrier, and while you do get an axe as a throwing weapon, you don't start with it, meaning you're defenseless until you can find it. Everything here is just harder than it should be. Your main power-up is a skateboard, but unlike power-ups in a normal game like Mario, the skateboard just makes things more difficult, as it forces you to constantly move and control your speed. Sure, you could eat a hit while you're riding it, but that won't matter when you skate off a cliff. I found myself just avoiding this thing in some of the harder sections. They even lock continues behind a hidden item on the first world. If you find it, you get unlimited continues with a code, but without it, you get none. It's like they do everything to make this game as difficult as humanly possible, and don't even get me started on the ice physics. Despite all that, I do love this game, and its extreme difficulty make it a perfect candidate for this list, as at least as hard as Ghosts and Goblins, and harder than Ninja Gaiden in my view. It just needs more attention for how absurdly difficult it is.